The transport ship shuddered as it left hyperspace, and Commander Zethkar felt his stomach twist in that familiar way. After 30 years of military service, he still hated space travel. The massive alien looked out the small window at the distant moon of Kepler 442b, where his new assignment waited. Zethkar was not like most of his kind. The Vortanian Empire was known for producing fierce warriors, but even among his people he was considered exceptional. His dark blue skin bore the scars of countless battles, and his forearms had wielded weapons on 12 different worlds. At 8 feet tall, he towered over most species in the galaxy, but today he felt uncertain about what lay ahead. The orders from High Command had been simple, but strange. "Evaluate human military potential," the message had said. "Report back," with recommendations. What made it strange was that humans were barely known to the Galactic Council. They had only been in space for a few decades, hardly enough time to become a real threat to anyone. As the transport docked with the space station, Zethkar gathered his few belongings. His military kit was standard issue, but he also carried a small recording device that would help him document everything he saw. The High Command wanted details, and he would give them details. The station's artificial gravity kicked in as he stepped off the transport. The air tasted recycled like all space stations, but there was something else, a scent he did not recognize. It was not unpleasant, just different. He would later learn it was the smell of human coffee, something that seemed to flow through their veins instead of blood. A young officer approached him. She was small, maybe 5.5 feet tall, with short brown hair and green eyes. Her uniform was clean and pressed, and she moved with the confidence of someone who knew exactly where she belonged. "Commander Zethkar?" she asked, her voice clear and strong. "I'm Lieutenant Jake Morrison. I'll be your guide during your stay here." Zethkar looked down at her. He had expected to be met by someone higher ranking, perhaps a colonel or general. Instead, they sent this small human who barely reached his chest. Was this meant to be an insult? "I was told I would be working with your senior staff," he said, his voice carrying the deep rumble that made other species nervous. Lieutenant Morrison smiled. "You will be, sir. But first, Colonel Parker wanted me to show you around and get you settled. He figured you might want to see how we do things before the formal meetings start." Something in her tone made Zethkar pause. There was no fear in her voice, no nervousness about speaking to an alien warrior who could probably break her in half without trying. Either she was very brave or very stupid. He decided to find out which. They walked through the station's corridors, and Zethkar noticed how different it was from other military facilities he had seen. The walls were covered with pictures and artwork, not just official portraits of leaders. There were images of families, landscapes from Earth, and even some drawings that looked like they had been made by children. "Your soldiers decorate their living spaces," he observed. "Yes, sir. Command believes it helps with morale. Being away from home for months or years can be hard on people. Having reminders of what we're fighting for helps." Fighting for? The phrase struck Zethkar as odd. Most species fought for glory, for resources, for territory. But humans talked about fighting for something, as if war was not the goal but the means to protect something else. They entered a large training area, where dozens of humans were engaged in various exercises. Some were practicing with weapons, others were working on physical fitness, and a few were huddled around computer terminals studying battle tactics. What surprised Zethkar was how quiet it all was. In Vortanian training facilities, warriors would roar and shout, pumping themselves up for battle. Here, the humans worked with a calm focus that seemed almost meditative. They spoke in quiet voices, giving corrections and encouragement to each other, but there was no excitement, no bloodthirsty eagerness. "They seem very calm," Zethkar commented. Lieutenant Morrison nodded. "Combat is serious business, sir. We train hard, but we don't get excited about it. Excitement can get you killed." A group of soldiers approached them. The one in front was a woman with sergeant stripes on her uniform. She was tall for a human, maybe 6 feet, with blonde hair pulled back in a tight bun. Her blue eyes were sharp and alert. "Commander, this is Sergeant Lisa Hayes," Lieutenant Morrison said. She runs our advanced combat training program. Sergeant. Hayes saluted smartly. Welcome to the station, Commander. I hope you'll have a chance to observe some of our training exercises. I would be interested in that, Zethkar replied. I have studied many different fighting styles. What makes human combat unique? The sergeant exchanged a look with Lieutenant Morrison. There was something in that look, a shared understanding that Zethkar could not quite grasp. Well, sir? Sergeant Hayes said slowly, I suppose you could say we approach combat differently than most species. We don't fight for sport or glory, we fight to end fights. End fights? Yes, sir. The goal is not to have a good battle or to prove how tough we are. The goal is to stop the enemy from fighting as quickly and efficiently as possible. Everything else is just details. Zethkar found this philosophy interesting, but not particularly unusual. Many species preferred quick victories to long campaigns. But as they continued the tour, he began to notice other things that puzzled him. The human soldiers were incredibly diverse. Their skin colors ranged from very pale to very dark. And they came in all shapes and sizes. Some were barely adults, others had gray hair and lined faces. In most military forces, soldiers were chosen for their physical similarity to create unity. But humans seem to celebrate their differences. Your warriors are very different from each other, he observed. Yes, sir, Lieutenant Morrison said. With pride, we believe diversity makes us stronger. Different backgrounds, different perspectives, different ways of solving problems. They stopped at a medical facility where Zethkar saw something that truly surprised him. Human medics were treating wounded soldiers, but not all of them were human. There were injured aliens from several different species, including one that looked like it might be Skelter, a known enemy of the Galactic Council. You treat enemy wounded? He asked. Of course, Sergeant Hayes replied, as if it was the most natural thing in the world. They're not our enemies once they're hurt and can't fight anymore. They're just people who need help. This made no sense to Zethkar. In Vortanian culture, enemies remained enemies until they were dead. Showing mercy to a wounded foe was considered weakness, a sign that you lacked the will to do what was necessary. As they walked back toward the command center, Zethkar's mind was spinning with questions. These humans were unlike any warrior species he had encountered. They seemed to have no hunger for battle, no pride in their strength, no desire to dominate their enemies. Yet something about them made him uneasy. Lieutenant, he said as they reached his assigned quarters, how long have humans been fighting wars? She paused, her hand on the door control. How long? Well, sir, I guess we've been fighting wars for as long as we've existed. It's just something. We do. And how many wars has your species fought? Lieutenant Morrison was quiet for a long moment. I don't think anyone has ever counted them all, sir. There have been a lot. After she left, Zethkar stood alone in his quarters, staring out at the stars. Something about that last exchange bothered him. A species that had been fighting for its entire existence, but treated war like a grim necessity rather than a glorious calling. Warriors who showed mercy to their enemies but spoke of combat with the casual familiarity of someone discussing the weather. He pulled out his recording device and began his first report. Day 1 of human evaluation. Initial observations inconclusive. Subjects display contradictory behavior patterns. Further investigation required. Outside his window, human and alien soldiers continued their endless training, preparing for battles that might never come or that might determine the fate of the galaxy. Zethkar did not yet know which possibility worried him more. 3 days into his assignment, Zethkar was beginning to think the High Command had wasted his time. The human soldiers, he observed, were competent but unremarkable. They followed orders, completed their training exercises, and maintained their equipment with professional efficiency. Nothing about them suggested they were any different from dozens of other species he had encountered. He was reviewing his notes in the observation deck when the alarm started screaming. The sound was unlike anything he had heard before. Not the steady warning tone used by most civilized species, but a harsh, urgent wailing that seemed designed to trigger instant panic. Around him, human and alien personnel moved with sudden purpose, But there was no panic. Instead, everyone seemed to know exactly what to do. Lieutenant Morrison appeared at his side, her face calm but serious. "Commander, we have a situation. Skelter raiders have breached the outer defense perimeter. You should come with me to the command center." Zethkar followed her through corridors that had suddenly transformed from peaceful hallways into organized chaos. Soldiers ran past them, but not in the confused rush he expected. Each person moved with purpose, heading to predetermined positions. What struck him most was how quiet it all was. Despite the urgency, no one was shouting or screaming orders. The command center was a hub of controlled activity. Officers stood at various stations, speaking in low, clear voices as they coordinated the defense. At the center of it all stood a human Zethkar had not met before, a tall man with graying hair and steady brown eyes. "Commander Zethkar," Lieutenant Morrison said quietly, "this is Major Chris Taylor, our operations commander." Major Taylor nodded briefly, but did not take his eyes off the tactical display. 12 Skelter attack ships, coming in fast from the asteroid field. They're using the rocks for cover, trying to get close enough to board the station. Zethkar studied the display. The Skelter were a warrior species known for their aggression and their preference for close combat. They had been raiding Galactic Council outposts for years, always seeking to capture rather than destroy, so they could take prisoners for their slave markets. "What is your standard response protocol?" Zethkar asked. "Deploy defensive screens. Establish a perimeter and attempt to negotiate," replied a voice from behind him. He turned to see a human woman approaching, her uniform bearing the insignia of a lieutenant. She was shorter than average, with red hair and intense green eyes. "Commander, this is Lieutenant Amy Stone, our tactical specialist," Major Taylor said without looking away from the display. "Negotiate?" Zethkar was surprised. "With raiders?" "It is required by Galactic Council regulations," Lieutenant Stone explained. "All conflicts must begin with an attempt at peaceful resolution." On the display, the Skelter ships continued their approach, weaving between asteroids with practiced skill. Zethkar had fought them before. They were brutal but predictable, preferring to overwhelm their enemies with superior numbers and savage determination. "Skelter Attack Squadron," Major Taylor spoke into his communicator. "This is Major Taylor of the Kepler station." "You are approaching a joint military facility? State your intentions." The response came back in the harsh, growling language of the Skelter, followed by a translation from the computer. "We come for slaves and supplies. Surrender now and some of you will live." "Negative," Major Taylor replied calmly. "You are ordered to withdraw from this system immediately." More growling than the translation. "We have 12 ships." "You have 1 station. We will take what we want." Zethkar watched Major Taylor's face. The human showed no anger, no fear, no excitement. His expression was as calm as if he were discussing the weather. This was not how warriors were supposed to behave before battle. "All stations, this is command," Major Taylor said into his communicator. "Skelter raiders have refused to withdraw. We are now under attack. Initiate Combat Protocol 7. What happened next changed everything Zethkar thought he knew about human warfare. The transformation was instant and complete. One moment, the humans around him were following standard defensive procedures. The next, they had become something else entirely. Their movements became faster, more precise. Their voices remained calm, but there was something underneath now. Something cold and hard. "Weapons free," Lieutenant Stone reported. "All defense platforms online." "Fighter Squadrons Alpha and Beta launch immediately," Major Taylor ordered. "Gamma Squadron remain in reserve." Through the observation windows, Zethkar watched human fighters streak out from the station's launch bays. They moved with a precision that seemed almost mechanical, forming up in tight formations and heading straight for the Skelter ships. "They are not using evasive maneuvers," Zethkar observed. "They are flying directly at the enemy." "Yes, sir," Lieutenant Morrison replied. "That is our doctrine. The fastest way to end the fight is to engage the enemy as quickly as possible." The first exchange of fire lit up the space around the station. Skelter plasma bolts streaked toward the human fighters, while the humans responded with weapons fire. That was frighteningly accurate. Within seconds, 2 Skelter ships were drifting dead in space. How did they target so precisely? Zethkar asked, amazed. Training, Major Taylor answered without taking his eyes off the display. Our pilots practice 8 hours a day, every day. They know exactly where to hit an enemy ship to disable it with minimum shots. The battle continued, but it was unlike any space combat Zethkar had ever witnessed. The Skelter fought with their usual aggressive tactics, trying to overwhelm the human fighters with numbers and firepower. But the humans responded with a level of coordinated precision that seemed almost supernatural. They did not fight like warriors drunk on battle lust. They fought like surgeons performing an operation, each move calculated and efficient. When a Skelter ship tried to ram one of the human fighters, the pilot simply moved aside at the last possible moment and fired a single shot that crippled the enemy vessel. Lieutenant Stone, Major Taylor said calmly, the lead Skelter ship, is attempting to flee. Disable its engines. Understood, sir. A human fighter broke from the main engagement and pursued the fleeing enemy ship. A few precise shots, and the Skelter vessel was drifting helplessly in space, its engines destroyed, but its life support intact. Within 10 minutes, the battle was over. 11 Skelter ships were either destroyed or disabled, and the 12th was retreating as fast as its damaged engines could carry it. The humans had not lost a single fighter, but what happened next shocked Zethkar even more than the battle itself. Medical teams to launch Bay 2, Major Taylor ordered. We have wounded prisoners coming in. Prisoners? Zethkar asked. I thought you destroyed their ships. We disabled them, Lieutenant Stone corrected. There are survivors on most of those ships. They will need medical attention. But they are enemies. They came here to enslave you. Major Taylor finally looked at him, and Zethkar saw something in the human's eyes that made him step back. It was not anger or hatred. It was something far more unsettling, a kind of cold acceptance. They are not our enemies anymore, Major Taylor said quietly. They are defeated. Now they are just people who need help. As the medical teams prepared to receive the wounded Skelter, Zethkar watched the human soldiers around him. They had gone from deadly warriors back to calm professionals in the space of minutes. No one was celebrating their victory. No one was boasting about their skills. They were simply doing their jobs, as if destroying an enemy fleet was just another task to be completed. Lieutenant Morrison approached him. Commander, Major Taylor asked if you would like to observe the prisoner processing. He thought you might find it educational. Zethkar nodded, though he was not sure what he might learn. He had seen many battles, fought in many wars, but he had never seen anything like what he had just witnessed. The humans had fought with a cold efficiency that was more terrifying than any battle, rage he had ever encountered. As they walked toward the medical bay, Lieutenant Morrison spoke quietly. The Skelter will be treated for their injuries, given food and shelter, and eventually return to their own space through prisoner exchange programs. You will not execute them? Or sell them as slaves? She looked at him with surprise. Of course not. That would be against our laws. We do not harm prisoners, but they came here to harm you. Yes, but that was before. This is now. Now they are prisoners, and we have a duty to treat them humanely. Zethkar walked in silence, his mind struggling to process what he had seen. A species that could fight with machine-like precision, but showed mercy to defeated enemies. Warriors who treated combat like a job to be done rather than a glorious calling. Soldiers who could destroy a superior enemy force and then immediately begin caring for the wounded. That night, alone in his quarters, Zethkar made his second report. Day 3 of human evaluation. Subjects demonstrate advanced combat capabilities combined with contradictory behavioral patterns. Recommend extended observation to understand full scope of human military potential. But as he spoke those words, he knew they were inadequate. What he had witnessed today was not just advanced combat capability. It was something else entirely, something that made him deeply uncomfortable. He had seen species that were fierce in battle, and he had seen species that were merciful to their enemies. The morning after the Skelter attack, Zethkar could not stop thinking about what he had witnessed. He had seen many battles in his 30 years of service, but nothing had prepared him for the cold efficiency of human warfare. The way they had switched from peaceful defenders to deadly warriors and then back to carrying medics left him deeply disturbed. He found Major Taylor in the station's cafeteria, eating breakfast and reading reports on a tablet. The human looked up as Zethkar approached, his expression neutral and professional. "Commander, I hope you found yesterday's events educational," Major Taylor said, gesturing to an empty chair. "Educational, yes. But also confusing," Zethkar replied as he sat down. "I have never seen soldiers fight the way your people do. There was no emotion, no battle fury. It was like watching machines." Major Taylor nodded slowly. "That is by design. Emotion clouds judgment. In combat, clear thinking keeps people alive and gets the job done faster. But afterward, you immediately began caring for the wounded enemies. How do you reconcile such contradictory behaviors?" "They are not contradictory," Major Taylor said, setting down his tablet. "They are both necessary. We fight to protect what we value, and we value life. Even enemy life, once the fighting stops." Zethkar leaned forward. "I would like to understand this better. Could I perhaps study your military history? Learn how your people developed this approach to warfare?" Major Taylor was quiet for a moment, then nodded. "I can arrange that. Colonel Steve Parker oversees our historical archives. He has been with us for 20 years and knows our military traditions better than anyone." An hour later, Zethkar found himself in a secure section of the station he had not seen before. The walls were lined with displays showing various periods of human history, and the air smelled of old paper and electronic storage devices. It was here that he met Colonel Parker. The colonel was older than the other humans Zethkar had met, with gray hair and lines around his eyes that spoke of long experience. His uniform was perfectly pressed, and he moved with the careful precision of someone who had spent decades in the military. "Commander Zethkar," Colonel Parker said, extending his hand. "Major Taylor tells me you want to learn about human military history. I must warn you, it is not a pleasant subject." "I have studied the military history of many species," Zethkar replied. "I doubt human warfare could be more brutal than what I have already seen." Colonel Parker's expression grew serious. "You might be surprised. Please follow me." They walked through a series of rooms filled with historical displays. The first room showed early human weapons, crude tools made of stone and metal. Zethkar examined them with interest, noting how even the earliest implements showed signs of sophisticated design. "Your ancestors were tool makers," he observed. "Yes, but not just any tools. Weapons. Humans have been making weapons for killing other humans for over 2 million years. We have been at war with each other for our entire existence as a species." This statement made Zethkar pause. "Your entire existence? That seems unlikely. Most species fight territorial wars or resource conflicts, but continuous warfare would prevent civilization from developing." Colonel Parker activated a wall display that showed a timeline of human history. Red markers indicated wars and conflicts, and Zethkar was shocked to see that the red markers covered almost the entire timeline without break. "I know it seems impossible," Colonel Parker said quietly, "but it is true. We have records of over 15,000 major wars in our written history alone, and that does not include the countless smaller conflicts, rebellions, and civil wars." Zethkar studied the display in growing horror. "How did your species survive? How did you develop technology and culture with constant warfare?" "We learned to fight and build at the same time. War drove innovation. We developed new weapons, new tactics, new ways of organizing society. Each conflict taught us something new about how to kill more efficiently." They moved to the next room, which focused on more recent human history. Here Zethkar saw weapons that made his blood run cold. Devices capable of killing thousands of people at once, poisons that could destroy entire ecosystems, and bombs that could level cities. "These weapons are forbidden by all galactic treaties," he said, his voice barely Above a whisper. Yes, they are now. But we developed them before we knew about galactic law. We pointed them at ourselves and came very close to destroying our own planet several times. Colonel Parker activated another display showing images of destroyed cities and devastated landscapes. This is what we call total war. When humans believe their survival is at stake, we mobilize every resource, every person, every weapon we have. We do not fight to win territory or resources. We fight to ensure our enemies cannot threaten us ever again. But the soldiers I observed yesterday showed mercy to their enemies. They treated wounded prisoners with care. That is also part of our military tradition, Colonel Parker explained. We learned that how we treat our enemies during war determines what kind of people we become after the war. We developed strict rules about how to conduct warfare, even as we developed more terrible weapons. They entered a room that seemed different from the others. Here, the displays showed not weapons, but documents, laws, and treaties. Zethkar read, some of them with growing amazement. These are rules for how to fight wars, he said. Yes, we call them the laws of war. They govern how we treat prisoners, how we protect civilians, what weapons we can use, and how we conduct ourselves in battle. Every human soldier learns these rules before they learn how to fire a weapon. But why would you limit yourselves? In warfare? Would it not be more efficient to fight without restrictions? Colonel Parker was quiet for a long moment. Commander, let me show you something that might help you understand. He led Zethkar to a final room, smaller than the others, with a single display case in the center. Inside the case was a simple wooden box, old and worn. This belonged to a human soldier who fought in one of our most terrible wars. Inside are letters he wrote to his family. In them, he describes the horrible things he saw and did during the fighting. But he also writes about the enemy soldiers he helped, the civilians he protected, and the rules he followed even when it would have been easier to break them. Colonel Parker opened the case and carefully removed one of the letters. He read aloud in a quiet voice, I have seen things that will haunt me forever. I have done things that I pray I never have to do again. But I have also remembered that even in the darkest times we must remain human. The enemy soldiers the first captured today were given food and medical care. They were somebody's sons and fathers, just like me. The war will end someday, and when it does, I want to be able to look at myself in the mirror. Zethkar felt something cold in his chest. He was fighting for his life, but he still cared about his enemies. That is what makes us human, Colonel Parker said. We have the capacity for terrible violence, but we also have the capacity to choose when and how to use that violence. We can be monsters when we have to be, but we never stop trying to be better than our worst impulses. They spent the rest of the day going through more historical records. Zethkar learned about human conflicts that had lasted for decades, wars that had reshaped entire continents, and battles where humans had fought against impossible odds and somehow won. But what disturbed him most was not the scale of human warfare, but the pattern he began to see. Every time humans faced an enemy that threatened their existence, they did not just fight to win. They fought to make sure that enemy could never threaten them again. They called it unconditional surrender, and it meant that wars with humans ended only when their enemies were completely defeated. Have you ever negotiated a peace treaty with an enemy that was still capable of fighting? Zethkar asked. Colonel Parker thought for a moment. Not when we believed our survival was at stake. We have negotiated many treaties, but only after we were certain the enemy could no longer threaten us. When humans fight for survival, we fight until the threat is eliminated. As evening approached, Zethkar found himself overwhelmed by what he had learned. He had always thought of war as a tool for achieving political goals, a way to gain territory or resources or prestige. But humans seemed to view war as something else entirely, a struggle for existence that ended only when one side was completely eliminated. Colonel, he said as they prepared to leave the archives, what would happen if humanity faced an enemy that could not be defeated, an enemy that was stronger than you? Colonel Parker's expression grew very serious. Then we would find a way to take them with us. Humans do not surrender when we believe our survival is at stake. We would rather die fighting than live as slaves. That night, Zethkar sat in his quarters staring at his recording device. He had filled it with hours of notes and observations, but he was not sure how to summarize what he had learned. How could he explain to the High Command that humans were not just another warrior species, but something fundamentally different? He began his report slowly. Day 7 of human evaluation. Subjects demonstrate military traditions unlike any previously encountered. Recommend immediate consultation with High Command regarding classification of human threat potential. But as he spoke those words, he realized they were inadequate. What he had learned today was not just. For 2 weeks after his visit to the archives, Zethkar found himself unable to focus on his regular duties. The images of human warfare kept playing in his mind, especially the timeline that showed 15,000 years of continuous conflict. He had requested additional materials from Colonel Parker, but what he really needed was answers to questions that nobody seemed willing to ask. The breakthrough came when he was reviewing personnel files in his quarters. He had been looking through the records of human soldiers stationed on the base, trying to understand their backgrounds, when he noticed something strange. Many of them had notes in their files about prior alien contact or xenospecies combat experience. This was odd because humans had only been part of the galactic community for a few decades. How could so many of them have combat experience with alien species? He brought his concerns to Major Taylor the next morning. The human officer listened to his questions with a carefully neutral expression, then was quiet for a long moment. Commander, I think it is time you spoke with General Pete Collins. He is the senior human officer in this sector, and he has authorization to share information that I do not. An hour later, Zethkar found himself in a secure conference room he had not seen before. The walls were covered with star charts and tactical displays, and the air had the heavy feeling of a place where important decisions were made. General Collins was a tall man with silver hair and eyes that seemed to see everything. He wore simple fatigues rather than a dress uniform, and his handshake was firm but not aggressive. When he spoke, his voice carried the quiet authority of someone who had given orders that sent people to their deaths. Commander Zethkar, he said, gesturing to a chair. Major Taylor tells me you have questions about human military history. I understand you have been studying our archives. Yes, General. But I have found some inconsistencies in the records. Your soldiers seem to have more combat experience with alien species than should be possible. General Collins nodded slowly. You are observant, that is good. It means you are taking your assignment seriously. He activated a wall display that showed a map of the galaxy. Commander, what I am about to share with you is classified at the highest levels. It does not leave this room, I understand. Tell me, what do you know about first contact between humans and alien species? Zethkar thought for a moment. The official records state that humans were discovered by a Galactic Council survey mission 53 years ago. Contact was peaceful, and humans were gradually introduced to galactic civilization. That is what the official records state, yes. But it is not the complete truth. General Collins touched a control and the display changed to show shipping routes and trade lanes. The reality is that humans encountered alien species long before official first contact. We had been expanding into space for over a century when we started running into other civilizations. But there are no records of this in the Galactic Council archives. No, there are not. Because those early encounters did not go well. The display changed again, showing what looked like battle reports and casualty lists. Zethkar leaned forward to read them, and what he saw made his blood run cold. The hegemony of Keth, he read aloud. Status, extinct. Last known engagement, 74 years ago. The Keth were the first alien species humans encountered, General Collins explained. They were a militant empire that had been expanding for centuries. When they found human colonies, they demanded surrender and tribute. The humans refused. What happened? The Keth had superior technology and greater numbers. They should have won easily. Instead, the war lasted 18 years and ended with the complete destruction of the Keth civilization. Zethkar stared at the display in horror. Complete destruction? You mean genocide? We mean extinction. The Keth would not negotiate, would not accept anything less than total human surrender, so humans made sure they could never threaten anyone again. General Collins changed the display again. The Vorth Collective, the Sarn Empire, the Bloodclaw clans, all extinct. The list went on. Species after species, all marked as extinct, all with final engagement dates within the last century. Zethkar counted 12 different civilizations that no longer existed. How is this possible? He whispered. How could humans defeat so many different species? Because we do not fight the way other species fight, General Collins said quietly. When other species go to war, they fight for territory, resources, or political advantage. They fight until they achieve their goals or until the cost becomes too high, then they negotiate. And humans? Humans fight for survival. Every war is an existential threat. Every enemy is trying to destroy us completely, so we fight until the threat is eliminated. General Collins activated another display, this one showing detailed battle reports. The Keth had better weapons and more ships, but they fought like most species do, trying to capture territory and force surrender. Humans fought like humans do, targeting their homeworld, their industrial centers, their ability to make war. But surely they tried to negotiate once they realized they were losing. They tried, but by then it was too late. Humans had already committed to their destruction. You see, Commander, humans have a saying, never start a fight with someone who has less to lose than you do. Zethkar studied the reports with growing horror. The human military doctrine was unlike anything he had ever seen. They did not try to defeat enemy armies or capture enemy territory. They systematically destroyed everything that allowed their enemies to function as a civilization. The Galactic Council does not know about this, he said. No, they do not. The Council discovered humans after these wars were over. We told them we were a peaceful species interested in trade and cultural exchange, which is true, we prefer peace. But we prepare for war, but why hide this information? The Council would want to know about the fate of these species. General Collins was quiet for a long moment. Commander, what would happen if the Council learned that humans had driven 12 species to extinction? Would they welcome us as peaceful neighbors, or would they classify us as a threat to be eliminated? The question hung in the air like a weapon. Zethkar realized that he was sitting across from a representative of the most dangerous species in the galaxy, a species that had wiped out entire civilizations and then convinced everyone else that they were harmless. You are afraid, he said. Finally, yes, General Collins replied without hesitation. We are terrified. We know what we are capable of when we feel threatened. We know that if the galactic community turned against us, we would not go quietly. We would fight, and the fighting would not stop until either we were destroyed or everything else was. So you pretend to be peaceful. We are peaceful. We genuinely prefer cooperation to conflict. But we are also prepared for the alternative. General Collins activated a final display, this one showing current human military deployments. The scope was staggering. Hidden bases, concealed fleets, weapons research facilities that officially did not exist. Every human colony has defensive systems that could destroy a planet. Every human ship carries weapons that violate a dozen galactic treaties. Every human soldier trains for conflicts that we pray will never come. And if they do come, then the galaxy will learn what total war really means. Commander, your people have fought many battles. You have conquered worlds and defeated empires. But you have never fought a species that views every conflict as a fight for extinction. Zethkar felt something cold settle in his stomach. Why are you telling me this? Because your report will determine what the Galactic Council decides about humanity. If you recommend that we be classified as a threat, then we will become one. If you recommend that we be trusted as allies, then we will do everything in our power to be worthy of that trust. You are asking me to help you deceive the Council. I am asking you to help us avoid a war that nobody would survive. Commander, do you know what makes humans truly dangerous? Zethkar shook his head. It is not our weapons or our tactics or our willingness to fight. It is our ability to learn. Every species that attacked us taught us something new about warfare. Every defeat made us stronger. Every victory showed us how to win more efficiently next time. General Collins stood and walked to the window, looking out at the stars. We have been preparing for galactic war for 50 years, studying every species, learning every weakness, developing counters to every possible threat. We do not want that war, but if it comes, we will win it. Even against the combined forces of the entire galaxy? Especially against the combined forces of the entire galaxy. Because they will fight like a coalition of different species with different goals and different ideas about acceptable losses. We will fight like humans with one goal and one acceptable outcome, which is survival at any cost. Zethkar left the meeting with his mind spinning. He had thought he understood human warfare, but he had been looking at only a small part of the picture. The humans were not just another military species. They were something else entirely, something that had evolved in the crucible of endless conflict and emerged as the ultimate predator. That night, he sat in his quarters staring at a blank report form. What could he possibly tell the High Command? How could he explain that they had been evaluating not just another species? For 3 days after his meeting with General Collins, Zethkar remained in his quarters, unable to eat or sleep properly. The weight of what he had learned pressed down on him like a physical burden. He now held information that could change the fate of the entire galaxy, and he had no idea what to do with it. The Galactic Council was waiting for his report. They expected a simple evaluation of human military capabilities, a recommendation about whether humanity should be invited to join the Galactic Alliance or treated as a potential threat. They had no idea that the choice they were about to make could determine whether galactic civilization continued to exist on the 4th day. He finally left his quarters and walked through the station's corridors. Everywhere he looked, he saw humans going about their daily routines. They worked, laughed, shared meals, and cared for their families. They seemed so normal, so harmless. It was hard to believe that these same people belonged to a species that had exterminated 12 different civilizations. He found Lieutenant Morrison in the training bay, teaching a group of young soldiers how to maintain their weapons. She looked up as he approached, her expression showing concern. "Commander, you look tired. Are you feeling well?" "I have been thinking about our previous conversations," he said, "about human approaches to warfare." She dismissed her students and turned to face him fully. "Is there something specific you would like to discuss? Lieutenant, what would you do if you learned that the Galactic Council had decided humanity was too dangerous to be allowed to exist?" The question seemed to catch her off guard. She was quiet for a moment, her green eyes studying his face. "Is that a hypothetical question, Commander? Perhaps, perhaps not. Then I suppose I would do my duty. I would follow orders and protect my people in whatever way I could. Even if it meant war with the entire galaxy? Even then?" Her answer was given without hesitation, without emotion. It was the response of someone who had already considered the possibility and made peace with it. Zethkar found this more disturbing than any of the weapons or battle reports he had seen. "Do you think humanity would win such a war?" Lieutenant Morrison looked out the window at the stars beyond. "Commander, I hope we never have to find out. But if we did, I think the galaxy would be surprised by how much we have learned about fighting impossible odds." That afternoon, Zethkar requested a meeting with Admiral Karen Lewis, the highest-ranking human officer in the sector. He had heard her name mentioned in several conversations but had never met her. When she agreed to see him, he was surprised to find that she was much smaller than he had expected, barely 5.5 feet tall with short gray hair and intelligent brown eyes. They met in her private office, a simple room with a desk, a few chairs, and walls covered with pictures of human families and landscapes. It felt more like a teacher's office than a military command center. "Commander Zethkar," she said, gesturing to a chair. I understand you have been learning about human military history. I hope you have found it educational. Educational, yes, but also troubling. I imagine it would be. Most species find our history difficult to understand. Zethkar settled into his chair, which creaked under his weight. Admiral, I need to ask you a direct question. General Collins has told me about the wars with the Keth and the other species. He says humanity has been preparing for galactic war for 50 years. Is this true? Admiral Lewis was quiet for a long moment, her hands folded on her desk. Yes, it is true. We have been preparing for the possibility that galactic civilization might turn against us. But why? Why not simply reveal the truth about your capabilities and let the Council decide how to proceed? Because we know how that story ends. We have studied galactic history, Commander. We know what happens when a species becomes too successful, too powerful. They are eliminated before they can become a threat, so you chose to hide your true nature. We chose to give peace a chance. For 50 years, we have been model citizens of the galactic community. We have contributed to science, culture, and diplomacy. We have helped settle disputes and provided aid to species in need. We have done everything we could to prove that we can be trusted. But you have also been preparing for war. Yes, because we learned long ago that good intentions are not enough. The galaxy is full of species that mean well, but cannot be trusted when their interests are threatened. We prepare for war so that we can preserve peace. Admiral Lewis stood and walked to her window, looking out at the space beyond. Commander, let me tell you about the newest members of our military. 2 young soldiers who represent what we hope humanity can become. She activated a wall display showing 2 personnel files. The first showed a young man with dark hair and serious eyes, identified as Lieutenant Danny Reed. The second showed a woman with blonde hair and a confident smile, identified as Sergeant Monica Walsh. Lieutenant Reed lost his entire family in a pirate attack when he was 16. He could have chosen revenge, could have become consumed by hatred. Instead, he chose to join the military to protect other families from suffering the same loss. And Sergeant Walsh? She grew up on a colony world that was threatened by raiders for years. She could have left, could have moved to a safer place. Instead, she stayed and learned to fight so that her community would never have to live in fear again. Admiral. Lewis turned back to face him. These young people represent the future of humanity. They understand that violence is sometimes necessary, but they also understand that the goal of violence should always be to protect peace. But they would still fight if ordered to do so. Yes, they would fight, and they would win, because they understand what they are fighting for. Not for glory or conquest, but for the right to exist peacefully in a dangerous galaxy. Zethkar stood and walked to the window himself. Outside, he could see human and alien personnel working together, sharing knowledge and building friendships. It was hard to reconcile this peaceful scene with the military preparations he had learned about. Admiral, what do you want me to tell the Galactic Council? The truth, all of it. This answer surprised him. All of it? Including the extinct species. And the hidden fleets? Yes, Commander, we are tired of living a lie. We are tired of pretending to be something we are not. We would rather face the consequences of honesty than continue to build our relationships on deception, even if it means war, even then. Because if the galaxy cannot accept us as we are, then we were never truly part of it anyway. Admiral Lewis returned to her desk and pulled out a datapad. I am going to give you access to everything. All of our military capabilities, all of our strategic plans, all of our preparations for galactic war. You will have complete information. To make your report. Why would you do this? Because we believe in you. We believe that when you understand what we truly are, you will see that we are not a threat to be eliminated, but a resource to be valued. We are the galaxy's immune system, the force that stands ready to fight the battles that peaceful species cannot win. Zethkar took the datapad with trembling hands. And if I recommend that the Council move against you, then we will face that challenge as we have faced all others. Together, with determination and with the absolute certainty that we will do whatever is necessary to survive. That night, Zethkar sat in his quarters for the final time, surrounded by data files and reports that painted a complete picture of human military capability. The scope was staggering. Hidden weapons that could destroy star systems, fleets that could strike anywhere in the galaxy, soldiers trained to fight battles that would make the Skelter raid look like a training exercise. But he also saw something else. He saw the careful restraint with which humans had used their power. He saw the mercy they had shown to defeated enemies. He saw the young soldiers like Lieutenant Reed and Sergeant Walsh, who carried the burden of terrible capability, but used it only to protect others. He began his final report slowly, choosing each word carefully. To the High Command of the Vortanian Empire and the Galactic Council. After extensive evaluation of human military capabilities, I submit the following recommendation. Humanity should be invited to join the Galactic Alliance immediately. He paused, then continued. Not because they are harmless, but because they are dangerous in the right way. They possess the capability to destroy galactic civilization, but they also possess the wisdom to protect it. They have learned the hardest lesson of warfare, that the greatest victory is the battle you never have to fight. I recommend that humanity be given a role as the galaxy's protectors, the force that stands ready to face threats that peaceful species cannot handle. They have spent 50 years preparing for a war they do not want to fight. It is time to give them something worth protecting instead. As he finished his report, Zethkar looked out his window one last time. In the distance, he could see human ships on patrol, their crews ready for battles that might never come. Captain Tony Mitchell and Major Sandra Gray were down in the training bay, working with new recruits from a dozen different species, teaching them not just how to fight, but why to fight. The galaxy was about to learn the truth about humanity. Whether that truth would lead to peace or war remained to be seen. But for the first time since he had arrived at the station, Zethkar felt hope.